Amelia Dyer. You may have heard of this wicked lady. Her actions were evil, to put it lightly. Born Amelia Elizabeth Hobley in 1836, Bristol, England. What's now ironically known as the best place to live in England. Amelia had a pretty normal family. 4 older siblings, her father, a master shoemaker, and her mother, a housewife. Life seemed as normal as any other. Well, that's until her mother became increasingly ill. Her mom, Sarah Hobley, was suffering from typhus. Typhus, an infectious disease caused by rickets, characterized by purple rash, headaches, fever, and usually delirium, and historically a cause of high mortality during wars and famines. Tragically, it started to deteriorate her mother's mental health. She became extremely violent towards the children and started abusing them. Roughly 7 years after her sister's passing, her mother died. And a little over a decade later, Amelia would lose her father. Researchers would claim these mounted tragic events would have adverse effects on Amelia's mental well-being. Time passed, her brother took over the father's shoe business. A dispute occurred between her and her siblings, which led her to relocate to lodgings in Trinity Street, Bristol, where she met a man by the name of George Thomas, who she married shortly after. This is where she took an interest as a nurse and started to train to become one with the help of her husband. Baby farming, a flourishing business at the time, a historical practice of accepting custody of an illegitimate infant or child in exchange for payment in late Victorian Britain and other countries such as Australia and even here, United States. There's a whole lot more to baby farming, from wealthy parents who wanted to keep the baby secret to mothers not being able to afford taking care of their child. As you can imagine, taking care of a list of babies is challenging. So when the nurses felt overwhelmed, they would feed the babies syrup called Mother's Friend, containing opium. There were children overdosing and or dying of severe malnutrition, while the coroner were recording the deaths as debility from birth. In 1869, her husband George Thomas passed away. This was after Amelia gave birth to her daughter Ellen and resigned her position as a nurse to nurture her child. Now, being a single mother, she would soon find herself in financial troubles and needed a way to earn income while taking care of Ellen. Amelia chose baby farming as a career choice and was very money motivated. She would false advertise her services to clients by adopting and taking care of infants in exchange of payment and clothing for the baby, persuading desperate women to put trust in her to furnish a warm and safe environment for their child. Amelia would marry once again in 1872 to a man by the name of William Dyer, which she would divorce not long after. But during their marriage, they had 2 children together. At work, she would take in more babies than she could manage, but out of greed, she didn't decline. Normally, the baby farming facility would poorly supervise the children until they may die of malnutrition, but Amelia, she had other plans. She would avoid the troubles of waiting for a child to succumb to negligence and strangle them, then pocket the fees. Eventually, she was caught in 1879 after a doctor's suspicion due to the children's repetitious tragic deaths under her care. Now get this, she didn't get convicted of murder, no. Manslaughter, you may ask? Not even, but she was sentenced for a very long 6 months of hard labor. After her release, she became suicidal, even had to be admitted into mental hospitals. She was twice legally branded insane. She would eventually return to baby farming, where she would continue her baby killing spree, and didn't miss a beat. Knowing how unprofessional doctors were of handling death certificates, she began disposing the corpse of children herself. To continue her business safely from the law She and her family would relocate to different cities where she would use different aliases. To recap, she would false advertise her services, waive the expenses of taking care of the children or dealing with the inconveniences of a slow death, execute them right away, and collect most, if not all, of the fees. Amelia's downfall, according to several sources, was her carelessness, not to mention her complete disregard for human lives. Finally caught in March 1896, a bargeman found a packet in the River Thames. In the packet laid a dead baby girl later identified as Helena Fry. A detective found a faintly written name and address for Dyer on the package. So police put together an elaborate plan to confront her without her getting any possible leads. Knowing she would jump out the window and flee, they sent a female decoy to her address. Amelia, behaving like the greedy witch that she was, assumed it was potential new client. She opened the door to 2 police officers, was arrested, and charged with murder. The following month, the river was searched and 6 more babies were discovered. Items from Dyer's home suggested she murdered at least a dozen infants. It was believed she could have murdered as many as 400 babies in her 20 to 30 years as a nurse. But all that would come to an end when the 57-year-old witch was executed on June 10th, 1896, by hanging. Before the execution by James Billington, a hangman for the British government, Amelia was asked,
"Do you have anything to say?"
She replied,
"I have nothing to say."
At 9 a.m., she was hanged. I want to thank you for taking your time out and for allowing me to share this bowl of cereal with you. See you on the next one.